Thank you, Angel and Parisian Phoenix Publishing, for allowing this book to even be where it is. Thank you to my parents who have encouraged me and always helped out with Deadlights. They've always listened to my rants about it, and they've helped me set this whole event up. Thank you to my sister. No worries. Thank you to my sister who helped with character designs and really helped me get the visual aspect of Deadlights down. Thank you to Killian, who is not here tonight or this afternoon, but they did the lovely, lovely cover art. And then thank you to my two friends from Charter Arts who read the book and really helped me figure out a lot of the kinks in it to get it where it is today. So just a quick order of operations, really quick. I'm going to start off by reading a section of Deadlights. Then I want to talk about just some of the inspirations, some of the things that got it to where it is. Then I want to ask you guys if you have any questions, maybe talk about it a little bit. And then I would like to hopefully sell some copies, which are over on a table in that other room. The first 10 copies that are sold are going to come with a 20% discount coupon for Pie Plus Tart, which also provided a lot of the food. And yeah, we also have some pins over there, which I didn't know about until a little while ago, but they were definitely a nice surprise. So without further ado, I want to read an excerpt from Deadlights chapter 10. With a blink, Maxwell found himself outside. It was amazing. Just like before, when he had visited Miskatonic, this dream, or whatever these nightmares were, they had become almost a one-to-one mirror of real life. He breathed in the air of this place, feeling the dew that had settled amongst the grass and the reeds, far better than the dimly lit halls of Miskatonic University. Maxwell stood on his very own estate. He gazed to the imperial manor in the distance, watching from its proud place on the hill above the fishing lake. Looking at his family estate now, compared to how it had looked in this dream, nobody would have guessed they were even in the same place. Maxwell now stood at the cusp of the past. This was the estate before the small army of groundskeepers had left, and before all of the trees had shriveled and died, taking his father with them. The estate was lush with color here, from the bright, flamboyant water lilies to the glittering starlight above, reflecting off of the water with shades of blue, purple, all amongst bright, shining stars. The estate had always had a wondrous sky. You couldn't get a sky like that in the city, with the smog and the soot. Nor could you get it at Miskatonic, despite its seclusion. No, the stars had always seemed brighter in the skies above the Corvid family estate. But that brilliance had eventually died, perhaps keeping company with Maxwell's father in the great beyond. Do you want to know where I came from, little bird? A voice rang out. Curios's voice, the one that always hosted these nightmares. Though he wasn't listening to Curios, Maxwell was busy taking the estate in, or taking in whatever this was. For this was not the Corvid estate, not anymore. This place was from his memories. It no longer existed, and this, all of this was a cruel, crude, and callous approximation of reality. You should watch the sky, Curios whispered. Maxwell did as he was told. Maxwell stared into the beautiful sky, the familiar sky he remembered from the Corvid estate of his youth. The rich purples and deep blues provided a perfect backdrop for glittering stars. Amidst this breathtaking scene, a trail of bright yellow streaked across the canvas. Maxwell shivered. It was like a shooting star. But then the odor hit him. Shooting stars did not smell like burning sulfur, and they certainly did not make a terrible, animalistic screeching as they hit the ground. He jumped to the side as the comet landed directly a few yards from him, planting into the green, verdant water rather unceremoniously, with little more than a plop. Despite being about the size of his head, it did nothing but sizzle and cool down in the water for a little while, still emitting that horrible smell, the smell of rotting eggs, of sulfur. Maxwell watched in anticipation as the comet rocked and bobbed, but still nothing happened. He debated wading into the water to inspect the asteroid himself, but it was still far too hot, and his socks had finally dried anyway. What does any of this mean? Maxwell asked, curious. He knew that it was listening, after all. He knew that Curios could still hear him, based on the voice still echoing in his head. But his host was nowhere around. What, you come from space? You're what? That? The comet? What are you trying to tell me? No, Curios whispered. Suddenly, the wind picked up, a warm wind, a wind which went in and out, like breathing. The world began to change again. Maxwell winced. He squinted as if trying to keep the moisture out of his eyes, but as the wind whipped them open once again, he saw black. At first he closed his eyes tightly, thinking that something might have gotten in them, but when he opened them, the blackness was still bleeding across his vision. Before Maxwell's eyes, he stood helpless as the estate decomposed, melted, and faded until all that remained was a black, slimy, white speckled mold. This is what I am, Curios whispered again. Maxwell's hand began to melt. Despite the disgusting spectacle, there was no pain. He was succumbing to the sludge as it ate away at him, ate his flesh, assimilating his palm into the tidal wave of decay, slowly swallowing the world. As his hand transformed into clumpy jelly, his fingers snapped, painlessly dripping to the ground, with nothing but a slice of fingernail remaining. He wanted to scream, but he could do nothing but watch as slowly the black consumed it. This was, of course, because the mold was eating away at his throat now as well. Maxwell raised his arm, but it wasn't Maxwell raising his arm. Through the mold, Curios was spreading. It had spread into his body, slowly taking more and more, like a parasite. Curios made him raise his arm, the one missing a finger, the blackened, slimy hand that had now advanced to a mold-consumed stump. And the thing forced Maxwell to fix his eyes on the goo, the black, the mold. Little bird, I came from this, Curios told him. Maxwell couldn't tell where he was anymore, but he knew it was black. He knew that it was incredibly, undoubtedly, unequivocally pitch black. Little bird, Curios said, the words wriggling in Maxwell's ears. I came from you. And that's where I'm going to end for the excerpt for the day. So, thank you all very much. I realized that I skipped a step somewhere in there. I was supposed to explain that Deadlights is a Lovecraftian horror novel, but I guess you guys might have figured that out. I'm sorry if it was a little jarring with the body horror imagery, but Yeah, Deadlights is a Lovecraftian horror novel, and I wanted to put my own spin on that genre because I've always adored Lovecraft horror. I think it's the best kind of horror, in my opinion, and Deadlights is my modern day tribute to all of Lovecraft's writing and all of his wonderful, wonderful pieces, although they are very, very dated by today's standards. So Deadlights follows Maxwell, our protagonist, as he goes down into the Corvid estate, his old family home. His father recently died, and he gets called out of university to deal with the affairs. Though he gets trapped there, and along the way has to deal with fish people, lifelike nightmares, and far, far too much paperwork. Yeah, I wanted to just quickly talk about my inspirations, my process, and how Deadlights kind of came to be, I guess. Because, I don't know, that's what the articles told me to do at book launches. So if you don't mind, now that I've read that little excerpt, I want to kind of talk about, all that stuff. So just quickly starting off, Deadlights started off as a grimdark book. If you don't know what grimdark is a genre that is characterized by an entire lack of heroes. Nobody in grimdark can be even the slightest bit heroic. Everyone's selfish, everyone's doing things for their own personal gain, and I love grimdark. I adore stories like that. I love that whole no hope, everything is awful approach to storytelling that has become so popular in recent years. That's what all of Lovecraft's stories were. They were all very nihilistic, and they were all about how insignificant we as human beings, as individuals, kind of were in the greater scheme of, the life, universe, everything. And Deadlights kind of started off as that, but halfway through the writing process, I kind of realized, man, do I hate writing grimdark. I love reading it, but I didn't want to tell a grimdark story anymore. And so Deadlights kind of became a parody of grimdark. Instead of doing what Lovecraft did back in 1920 and talking about how humanity is useless and we're all gonna die someday, all that jazz, I wanted to do a subversion of that. In realizing that I hated writing grimdark, I realized that there aren't really a lot of stories that are optimistic nowadays. I feel like in today's day and age, we have so much bad news bombarding us constantly from news, from the internet. Human beings kind of like to focus on the negatives way more than we do the positives. And so Deadlights became a parody of grimdark because of that realization. I didn't want to contribute to that. And so Deadlights became, from what I've seen, the first more positive, feel-good Lovecraft story, although you wouldn't be able to tell that from the excerpt that I read. I think we all need to stay positive in times like these, and I think that I wanted Deadlights to help with that a little bit. So yeah, I'm affectionately calling Deadlights a bright grim book. I don't know if that term has been used before, but I'm sure somewhere out there there's something like it. But I haven't really read a story that has that same feeling attached to it. So if you want my pitch, there it is. First one of its kind that I have read. So just quickly, I wanted to go over my routine for writing Deadlights because I feel like whenever anyone asks me about it, one of the first things they ask is advice for how they can finish their own stories. a lot of people I know have unfinished drafts, and I mean, I had an unfinished draft for like 3 years. And I just wanted to quickly say that, I mean, just persistence, practice, just continue hammering away at it until it's over. That's how Deadlights got here. And I can't thank my parents enough for encouraging me to just continue plugging away at it, 3 pages a night, or sometimes not even that, just whatever, however much I could. And the final thing I just wanted to quickly say is that Deadlights wears its inspirations on its sleeve. One of my favorite quotes I've ever heard comes from my film teacher at Charts, and that is, everything has been said, not everyone has said it yet. I firmly believe that people shouldn't worry about creating something entirely original. I think that you should really take inspiration from other creatives and just put your own spin on things. Deadlights has a number of inspirations, and I'm never going to be able to tell all of them. We would be here for hours, but just a couple of them. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Anything by Thomas Ligotti, if you know that author. Some video games, Bloodborne, The Forest, Hollow Knight, just plenty more. Artists should steal, not in the plagiarizing way, but in the idea way. If you see something that someone else has made and you really like it, if it brings you any joy at all, I firmly believe that you should look on how you would do that thing. How would you, as a person, change it or use the idea yourself? Just artists should steal. That's what I'm saying. And yeah, so that kind of sums up everything I had to say. Once again, I'm sorry I skipped a step and didn't tell you guys what the book was about before reading an excerpt, but hopefully everyone kind of got it. And I just now wanted to see if there were any questions, if anyone had anything they wanted to add. I'm more than happy to talk about this. I could talk about it for hours. Please ask Felix. I think I have talked about it for hours with them. But yeah, so anybody have any thoughts or? Okay, Beatrix.
How did you decide on Maxwell as the main character, like his personality and everything?
Repeat the question.
So Beatrix asked how I decided on Maxwell as a character, as the protagonist, how I decided on his thoughts, his personality. And I want to say that he's always been the protagonist, but he hadn't. Deadlights used to have a dual POV. It used to have both Maxwell and his uncle as main characters. I decided that was too much work, and so cut one of them from the entire story. And we were left with Maxwell. It was kind of a which one did you like more situation. But I feel like when people make art, they usually make the character somewhat tied to themselves. Not in a self-insert way, but I think there's a certain amount of yourself that you put into every character you make. And I denied that Maxwell had elements of myself for the longest time. But here's the thing. I made Maxwell when I was in middle school. And middle schoolers can be nihilistic, edgy, and just all around bad. Maxwell kind of sprang from that part of myself. And I used to think he was really cool. I don't anymore. I kind of think he's a bit of a loser, but I think he's an endearing loser. And that's kind of where he comes from, I guess. Anyone else?
I'm his grandmother, and I just have to say, this big family affair here, this isn't his first novel. At age 10, he wrote 120 pages.
We don't bring that up. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about it.
Because he dictated it, I wrote it out longhand, and his mother typed it. Yeah.
And I can't thank you enough for that because it did really spark my love of writing. Yeah, that novel's never going to see the light of day. It is tucked away in a place no one will ever find it.
I know.
It's in the
Don't
bookcase.
worry.
You won't for very much longer. All right, Fiona.
I have a question, two questions. Actually going on from the question B had, and how you were saying that Maxwell started sort of you started him in middle school, so he was a certain way, and you think he's now an endearing loser. But as you progressed in writing the novel, did Maxwell change?
Oh, of course he did. Every single character changed in some way. As I was writing Deadlights, characters who started off as very tropey, very one note, I started exploring them in every possible direction they could go. Beatrix helped me a lot with artwork over the years and concept art.
Not good artwork.
Just like how the characters weren't good characters. But you can track their progression as they changed. And I think it's really interesting to see how much Deadlights has kind of evolved from that first initial concept. Everyone changed. The entire meaning of the book kind of changed. It got flipped on its head as I was writing it. And I think it's a good way to show how far I've come as a writer as well.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, Felix.
From the initial idea, how long did it take for you to get here?
3 years. I started Deadlights when I was in 7th grade over COVID, because there wasn't really anything else to do. And it started off as my idea for a trilogy before I realized I was putting way too much work into something I was not even that interested in. And then it slowly just evolved and evolved and evolved. It kept changing. There's about 4 unfinished drafts. I had to restart countless times. But over the course of 3-ish years, it was finished. And then I guess now it'd be 4 years, but that little block of editing, I don't count that because really that was all Angel. Angel's suggestions helped the book so much change and evolve. Come on, take a little credit. So yeah, Scott, I'm so sorry.
Aside from the familial between Max and who you called his uncle, was there some assimilation of the uncle into the character of Max, and or will there be an appearance of the uncle at some other time?
There is.
Did you want to repeat that? Sorry,
Okay, hold on. So Max's uncle, his name's Alexander. He's actually the character we start the book off on in the prologue, and he was kind of added there as a little Easter egg because people who have known me for a long time will know that Alexander is still in Deadlights to some degree, but he's not nearly as important as he once was to the plot. And I will say some of Alexander's elements made it into Maxwell, but not that many. I'm saving him for a different project now, because I still like him overall. Rainey?
At least in the excerpt you read, you had that sort of entity. I think it's called the Curious.
Yeah, Curious.
Where did you get the inspiration for that? Because that was really cool.
Okay, so Curious is a very loving homage to my favorite short story collection of all time. The King in Yellow is a beautiful 3-story collection by Robert W. Chambers, and he is also a character from the Lovecraftian horror mythos, which Deadlights is very, very rooted in. The name Curios comes from a fan animation that was published in 2020 for a game called Bloodborne. Someone made their own character, and I thought the name Curios was really, really cool. and so I changed the spelling and made my own character. It is not even remotely the same how they ended up, so I think it's okay to admit that now. But that's kind of where he comes from. He is in my opinion, he is probably the character that came the furthest from how he started, because he started off as a very one-note antagonist and then slowly grew into probably my favorite villain that I've ever written, personally. Next. Oh.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the background of Lovecraft.
Okay.
For starters, and then also what happened as you were writing, was it Grimdark?
Grimdark, yeah.
Grimdark, what happened as you were writing kind of in that genre? I mean, you kind of already talked about this a little bit, but what happened that made you really decide that you want to stop writing kind of in that genre?
So, I'm gonna tackle the first one because this one's really easy. The first thing that anyone will tell you about Lovecraft today is that he was really, really racist. Lovecraft stories did not age well at all, but he created an entire genre of cosmic dread and this entire, I guess, aesthetic of horror that was all rooted in stars and oceans and rot and mold and slime. And I was first exposed to his writing over the pandemic because once again, wasn't anything else to do. And he was the grandfather of an entire library's worth of authors that all kind of sprang from his works. Lovecraft was unique among horror writers of the time being 1920, because he really wasn't just one guy. H.P. Lovecraft is credited with the creation of Lovecraft horror, but what was interesting about Lovecraft was that he would write a story, another author would read said story, and then that author would send him a letter that was like, hey, could I use your character in my story? And Lovecraft saw that letter, said, yeah, sure you can. In fact, I'll make it canon to my story. So it created this huge interconnected web of authors and writers all writing in the same universe, but all with their own different styles and takes on the same character. This is how Cthulhu ended up with a teenage daughter. And that's kind of why I fell in love with his writing to begin with, because more than just the cosmic nihilism and the horrible, horrible racism that I'm just not even gonna touch. You can find tons of that on the internet when it comes to his writing. But I loved the fact that Lovecraft created a lot of these characters with help from other writers, because that's what I used to do in elementary school. I was like, hey, I wrote this story, and then someone else said, hey, I love this story, I'm gonna make a character for this story. And before I knew it, I had 32 separate characters that I was trying to fit into one novel, and that's why my first ever story will never see the light of day. But that is kind of why I fell in love with Lovecraft to begin with. I do recommend his writing, but I also recommend that you disregard a lot of the hateful aspects of it. Now, the second part of your question was why I kind of distanced myself from Grimdark. And I'm going to be very honest, it just made me too sad. Like, especially over 2020, which was, I mean, just a bad year for a lot of people. There wasn't a single bit of good news to come out of that whole year until it ended. I kind of realized that as much as I loved reading grimdark stories and I liked that whole, once again, no hope, everything's awful approach, I didn't want to contribute to that because I felt that, I mean, people should be looking on the more positive side of life. People shouldn't be focused so much on the negative. And Grimdark, I mean, its whole characterization is it's all negative. So I kind of flipped Deadlights on its head halfway through writing it, and I turned it into something else, which was something more uplifting, something that I felt people would want to see at that time. Because there's only so much negativity that a person can handle before they need to view something a bit more uplifting. Any other question? Yes. Oh my God, I forgot again.
Wait till you're
Scott.
my age.
Scott.
Was there anything, have you been to any like urban exploration or any, did you have visual stimulus for what would become the estate?
I did. So a lot of Deadlights is rooted in its inspirations, especially visually. I mentioned the game Bloodborne before, which is another modern take on Lovecraft's mythos with sprawling Gothic architecture and these horrifying Lovecraftian cosmic werewolves. It sounds very hard to explain, which is why it was perfect for visual stimulation, I guess. Once again, my sister really helped me out with a lot of the character design and art. And even back when Deadlights wasn't as fully fledged as it is today, it still helped me out a ton with inspiration. Because I would look at her pieces and go, how do I incorporate this into the story? Because this is such an amazing visual.
So the locations were more imaginative than physical?
They were. I don't think I had any like solid pictures of anything for the estate, but
No urban
no,
exploration
not
of buildings or?
It mostly came from video games and the way Lovecraft described his locations in his stories. So yeah, unfortunately, not that many solid photographs of what the estate could look like.
Very true.
Angel.
I was just gonna say, that my question for you is based on the production of the book. As you know, we worked together, and I know, because I worked with you, every typeface, every image, you had final say-so on, and that was something that I loved working with you on. But did you want to tell anyone a little bit about the actual physical production of a book, some of your choices, and what you learned about what it takes to actually physically put a book together, in addition to the fact that you had me pushing you toward a finish line that you weren't sure you were ever going to make it to. You controlled a lot of that physical process.
So what I will say is that I think the book came out looking wonderful.
It does.
I think Gail, who unfortunately I don't think could make it today, Gail, who was the graphic designer, did an amazing job of the type in the book, the way it looks while you're reading it. It is very inspired by the way Lovecraft had his books published and the visuals inside of them. I think that when it came to working on Deadlights, it was a little exhausting at the end of the day. I never want to make it sound like sitting in a chair typing is more like physically or mentally difficult than anything else, but it tired me out a little bit. But I think overall, the self-publishing process, which I should mention, this is technically self-published. Yeah. The self-published.
Hugo keeps 100% of his royalties because of the fact that he is a young gentleman, and I wanted him to understand exactly how hard it is to make money with a book, and so that in the future, when he's negotiating with future bigger publishers, you would have the opportunity to know what those royalties actually mean, if he's offered a fraction of the sales or whatnot. So now he can see exactly how much it costs to produce the book, exactly how much it costs to print the book, exactly how much, you know, he's going to get from each of these sales, so he can make those decisions himself. I would have 100% published his book by myself and paid for everything and done all of that, but he's gonna go places in life, and I just wanted him to have that knowledge behind him. So he is absolutely 100% just as traditional as any of my other authors, but he keeps 100% of his royalties, and he's earning every penny, so.
Thank you. That's very kind to say. Yeah, once
So it was
again.
printed in Chambersburg, PA. Did I see a little?
That is a print-on-demand book, because the smallest traditional press run that I can do with a commercial printer would be 500 books, and then we'd have to distribute it. So in order to distribute it through the major channels of like Ingram and some of the other like Amazon and all that kind of stuff, it is a print-on-demand book, and they do have a facility in Chambersburg, PA. Their main one is in Tennessee, but yeah, those particular books came out of Chambersburg. You usually see the Chambersburg or the Tennessee facility.
You don't see
Jacksonville.
Chambersburg much for anything, so
Yeah.
I saw that
Yeah.
and I.
They actually used to have one out in Fogelsville,
Oh,
and they closed that one, which was really sad, because we could order like a case of books and get them like 2 days later. It was awesome, but anyway, so yeah.
So once again, thank you. That is so kind to say, Angel. And I think the book came out looking wonderful. Just overall, I once again just really want to quickly thank Killian, who couldn't be here tonight, but they did this amazing cover, and I cannot recommend them enough if you're ever looking for artwork, because they did amazingly. Any other question, Max?
I had a question about Curios, our monster, I'm
Yeah.
gonna call him. Is he like a monster more connected to Maxwell, or is he like more connected to the estate, to the family, and it just so happens that Max is here?
Ah, spoilers. So
Don't answer it, 'cause it's
I will not answer anything. Those two sitting on the couch, Ian and Felix, they know already. They've read it, and they know exactly why I cannot answer anything. But yeah, I'm gonna keep that ambiguous for now. Curios is a little bit of an enigma throughout most of the book, so I want to keep that mystery intact a little bit for now. Anything else? Or
I did want to just sort of get, like, I think what's the hardest part about, any artistic endeavor is getting to the finish line and saying this is done. So how hard was that, and what did it take to get there?
A lot of back and forth, because honestly, I still kind of want to change things in Deadlights. I know I'm never gonna go back. I kind of never want to work on this book again after it's done. But I always see things when I'm rereading, and I'm always been like, oh, I could have done this better. Oh, I could have changed this. And I remember the night I finished Deadlights, I saw a typo. And I looked at this typo for a good 20 solid minutes, because I'd already declared the book as finished. And it was right on the back. It was right in the author's blurb. And I just kind of sat there. I did end up changing it. I did end up going back and fixing it. But yeah, it's hard to call things finished when I had kind of based my schedule around always working towards progress and always working towards finishing it. It felt a little bit weird and alien to know that I was done. And now I get to work on the sequel, which is a whole process. But yeah, it was definitely difficult to call Deadlights a finished product. I feel like in my heart, it still isn't finished because I'm working on a new book.
That's where I come in. It's my job
Yeah,
to tell
that's-
them it's done.
Right, I was going to say, yeah, I suppose.
And I'm glad you did.
There was a few points where you'd be like, are you sure we're still gonna make the deadline? Oh, yes, we are.
And then, all right, Max.
How did you decide decide what the ending of this story would be? Of course, there's going to be a sequel, but how did you decide that this is the ending point for these characters?
I knew. It is the one thing that has never changed throughout the whole.
Started knowing the ending before you knew the beginning?
I came up with the ending before I came up with the beginning. And I knew how I wanted Deadlights to end. I always kind of did. If you go back into the first ever draft, it still ends the same way. It was one of the first things I ever wrote for Deadlights. It is one of the last things that takes place, or it is the last thing that takes place in the story. And I'm still proud of it to this day. I still think that, coming up with the ending first is a thing that a lot of writers do, but I still think that it fits the story tonally, and I think that it's still pretty moving, not to like shill my own book too hard or anything. And I think we have enough time for one final question before I wanted to do some wrap-ups. All right, Yvonne.
I just want to say we're so proud of you, and it's just so amazing to see you sitting there after we've known you for, a couple of years anyway, so I'm just so proud of you. We'll read the book.
Thank you so much. Once again, thank you to everyone here for coming. An additional thank you to everyone who helped me through the process, from Angel to my family to my peers at school. Just thank you all so much for being here tonight. And that kind of wraps up everything that I personally had to say. So if you would like to join me in that room over there for some food, some refreshments, all provided by Pipeless Tart. I don't know if I'm legally required to say that, but I'm gonna say that. So yeah, that kind of wraps everything up. Once again, one final thank you. Just a quick PS. I do have copies in there. I will be signing them if anyone would like to purchase one. You can pay on your way out with Andy. Once again, thank you to him for allowing us to use this venue.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you so much.